Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are going to do something a little different. Usually, when we talk about the global economy, we are looking at, external forces, we talk about interest rates, we talk about supply chains, we talk about geopolitical conflict.
Right.
We look at the machine from the outside.
Exactly. We usually treat the economy as this cold, mathematical beast that just runs on data and logic.
Exactly. But today, we are popping the hood. We are looking for the engine. And I don't mean the literal engine of industry, and I don't mean money, and I don't even mean innovation, strictly speaking. We are looking at a psychological engine.
It is a fascinating pivot because the source material we are covering today argues that if you strip away all the spreadsheets and the stock tickers, the true propellant of capitalism, the thing that actually makes the whole thing move forward, is a cognitive bias,
A bug in our software.
a bug that thinks it's a feature. We are talking about optimism.
Now, I have to stop you there right at the beginning, because when I hear optimism, I think of the little engine that could. I think of glass half full. It sounds like a virtue.
It does.
It sounds like something I want my kids to have. You're telling me this is a bias.
It is absolutely a virtue in life, but in the world of economics, it acts as a bias. And the sources we have for this deep dive, specifically looking at the mechanics of the optimistic bias, suggest that while this trait is responsible for our greatest achievements, it is also responsible for our most catastrophic failures.
Wow.
It is a double-edged sword in the truest sense.
So we aren't talking about just thinking positive. This isn't just, a self-help mantra. We are talking about something deeper.
Much deeper. We are talking about an aggressive, pervasive, and often delusional biological optimism, a system that literally feeds on the overconfidence of people who think they can beat the odds.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I think most people, myself included, operate on the assumption that being optimistic is the right way to be. If you're a pessimist, you're a downer. You're not a leader.
Right. Society doesn't reward pessimism.
But you're implying there is a point where that belief becomes dangerous.
Absolutely. Think of it this way. Optimism is the engine of capitalism because it drives risk-taking. Without it, nobody would start a business. Nobody would invent anything.
Sure, that makes sense.
But that same engine often drives the individual risk-taker right off a cliff. The economy benefits from the crash, but the driver's in trouble.
That is a significantly darker framing than I expected for a topic like optimism.
That is, isn't it? But it explains so much about why businesses fail, why the stock market crashes, and why we, as individuals, make some really terrible financial decisions.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to understand the anatomy of this optimist, see specifically how it blinds us to reality, and then, crucially, look at a specific tool, a mental safeguard, that can stop us from crashing.
That's the plan. We'll go from individual biology to small business failures, up into the world of corporate hubris, and finally, a practical tool to stop us from driving off that cliff.
I love that structure. So let's start with the person, the anatomy of the optimist. The source material makes a really interesting point right off the bat. Optimism isn't just a mood you wake up with. It's not just having a good day.
No, it is much more fundamental than that. The research we're looking at says it is largely inherited.
Genetic. You're telling me I can be born an optimist?
Yes. The source material points to twin studies, which are, the gold standard for separating nature from nurture.
Right, identical twins raised apart, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And they suggest that optimism is roughly 50% genetic. Some people are just born lucky. I don't mean lucky in what happens to them, but lucky in how they are wired to perceive what happens to them.
So if I'm a generally grumpy person, I can blame my parents.
To an extent, yes. You can tell them it's in your DNA. And conversely, if you are someone who always sees the bright side, you really did win the genetic lottery.
The source actually said something pretty extreme about that, didn't it?
It did. It explicitly says that if you are allowed one wish for your child, strictly for their well-being, you should seriously consider wishing them optimism.
More than intelligence, more than talent.
More than almost anything else. Because the benefits are massive, right? It's not just feeling good in your head, it actually changes your body.
It's physiological.
Totally physiological. The research shows that optimists have stronger immune systems. They're less likely to suffer from clinical depression. They even heal faster from surgery.
Okay, wait, let's drill into that. They heal faster. How does that even work?
Well, it seems to be connected to lower stress levels, lower cortisol. But it's also behavioral. They actually live longer.
They live longer. Is that just because they are happier, or is there a specific mechanism there?
It seems to be a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you are optimistic, You view your future as something valuable. You assume you have a future worth preserving.
So you take care of yourself.
Exactly. So what do? You exercise, you eat right, you listen to your doctor, you take your medicine.
Whereas if you're a pessimist, you might think, we're all doomed anyway, pass the donuts.
That's basically it. It's a general disposition for well-being, and socially, it's a superpower.
A superpower.
Think about it. Optimists are cheerful. We like cheerful people. We want to be around them. We want to work with them. This makes them popular, which builds a social safety net. It is a virtuous cycle. They expect good things to happen, so they act in a way that makes good things more likely to happen.
Okay, so far, you're doing a terrible job of convincing me that optimism is bad. This sounds great. I want the immune system. I want the popularity. Where does the problem come in?
The problem isn't the feeling. The feeling is great. The problem is the filter. The source describes it as a sunny-side-up filter. It makes the world look more benign than it actually is. And while that is great for your mental health, it is terrible for your math skills.
It distorts the data.
Completely. The source mentions a classic phrase, the triumph of hope over experience.
I've heard that before, usually in the context of second marriages.
That is the classic example. You go through a divorce. It is painful, expensive, emotionally draining. The experience tells you that marriage is hard and high risk.
Right, the data is not good.
But then you meet someone new, and hope takes over. Optimists are statistically much more likely to remarry. They believe this time will be different.
And I suppose that applies to money, too.
Big time. Optimists are more prone to bet on individual stocks.
Which, as we have discussed in previous deep dives, is generally a bad strategy compared to index funds. The data says you probably won't beat the market.
Usually, yes. But the optimist believes they can pick the winner. They believe they have an edge, that they see something others don't.
So this is where the bias part really kicks in.
This is the crux of the issue. The source distinguishes between being mildly biased, which is healthy, keeps you moving forward, gets you out of bed, and being delusional. The blessings of optimism are only for those who can accentuate the positive without completely losing track of reality.
But that's a fine line, isn't it? Especially for the people who shape our economy, the inventors, the entrepreneurs, the CEOs. They can't just be mildly optimistic. They have to be borderline crazy to try what they try.
And that brings us perfectly to the next section in our source material, the entrepreneurial delusion.
I love that title, the entrepreneurial delusion. It sounds like a Robert Ludlum novel.
It's less of a thriller and more of a tragedy for most people. Let's look at the cold, hard numbers of starting a business. In the United States, what do you think the chance of a small business surviving for 5 years is?
I know it's low. Everyone says most businesses fail. I'll guess. Maybe 50%.
That's optimistic.
See? There it is.
It's about 35%. So roughly a 1 in 3 chance you are still standing in 5 years.
Okay, so the base rate, the default odds, are stacked against you from the start.
Heavily. But here is the kicker. Researchers surveyed people who were currently opening these businesses. These aren't random people. These are people with skin in the game, real entrepreneurs.
Right.
They asked them 2 questions. First, what are the chances of success for a business like yours? Not their specific shop, but the general category.
So if I'm opening a flower shop, I'm guessing the success rate of flower shops generally.
Right. And on average, what do you think they said? The real number is 35%.
I'm going to guess they said higher, maybe
50?
60%.
60. Okay, so they are already doubling the actual odds. They think the world is twice as safe as it actually is.
Exactly. They are already seeing the world through rose-colored glasses. But then the researchers asked the second question. What are the chances of success for your business?
Oh boy, let me guess. It's higher.
81%.
81. That is a massive jump. From a reality of 35 to a perception of 60 to a personal belief of 81. It gets better, or worse, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
Fully 33% of entrepreneurs, 1 in 3, said there was a 0 chance of failure.
0.
0.
That is wildly detached from reality. That's not optimism, that's hallucination. How is that possible?
It is. And this brings us to a really helpful mental model from the source material, the inside view versus the outside view.
Okay, this is a core concept. Let's make sure we really nail this for the listener. What is the difference?
So imagine you were opening an Italian restaurant.
Okay. I'm picturing it. I've got the checkered tablecloths. I can smell the garlic. And I've got my grandmother's secret sauce recipe. It's a killer recipe.
Perfect. That is the inside view. You are thinking about your sauce. You are thinking about your work ethic, your passion. You are thinking about the decor you picked out, the great location you found. You are focused entirely on the specific, unique details of your own situation.
Right. And I know those details are good. I know I'm a good cook. I know I'm going to work 14 hours a day. I believe in myself.
But the outside view ignores all of that. The outside view doesn't care about your grandmother's sauce. The outside view asks a colder question. What is the reference class here?
The reference class.
The category. In this case, the reference class is Italian restaurants, or maybe new restaurants in this city. And then it asks a really important question. What is the base rate of success for that class?
And the base rate is that, according to the source, something like 60% of restaurants fail in 3 years.
Correct. The outside view looks at the statistics of the category. The inside view looks at the specifics of the case. And the fundamental mistake we make, the entrepreneurial delusion, is that we ignore the outside view entirely.
But hang on, I have to play devil's advocate here. If I'm that restaurant owner, I'm thinking that statistic includes idiots. It includes people who can't cook, people with bad locations. It includes people who don't pay their taxes. I'm not them. Isn't it rational to adjust the odds based on my skill?
It is rational to adjust slightly. Of course your skills matter, but not to an 80 or 90 or 100% chance of success. The source asks a really poignant question. Would that woman still open the restaurant if she genuinely accepted, truly believed, that she had a 60% chance of failing?
Probably not. If I told you, give me your life savings and I'll flip a coin. Heads you win, tails you lose everything, you wouldn't do it. A 60% chance of failure is worse than that.
Exactly. But she acts as if the coin has two heads. She discards the statistics because she believes her personal qualities, the inside view, override the base rate. She thinks she can control the outcome.
I am the master of my fate.
Which works in poetry, but not in economics.
But surely some persistence is good. We love stories of people who were told no 100 times and then succeeded. J.K. Rowling getting rejected by 12 publishers, Walt Disney going bankrupt. If they had listened to the outside view, we wouldn't have Harry Potter.
That is the million-dollar objection.
Yeah.
And the answer is, we suffer from a massive survivorship bias.
Right.
We see the one J.K. Rowling. We don't see the graveyard of the 10,000 writers who persisted, got rejected, persisted again, and died broke. We don't tell their stories.
We only see the winners on the magazine covers. We don't see the failures in the bankruptcy court filings.
Exactly. And there is a study cited in the source material by an economist named Thomas Ostebro that completely dismantles this idea that persistence is always good. It's honestly a bit heartbreaking.
This is the inventor's study.
Yes. So Ostro looked at a program in Canada called the Inventor's Assistance Program. This was designed to help everyday people who had an idea for a gadget or a product, but didn't know if it was viable.
A kind of Shark Tank before Shark Tank.
A little bit, yeah. The inventors would pay a small fee, and a panel of experts, engineers, marketers, business people would objectively grade their idea on 37 different criteria.
Wow, that's thorough.
Very. Cost, market demand, manufacturing difficulty, safety, all of it.
So it's a report card for your dream.
It is. And they give a letter grade from A to E. If you get a D or an E, the program is effectively telling you, this is a bad idea, it will fail, do not proceed, save your money.
And these experts were accurate. Their grades actually predicted failure.
Highly accurate. Over 70% of the projects that received D and E grades failed completely to ever reach the market. It was a very strong signal.
So if you get a D, the rational thing to do is stop. You've just paid for expert advice saying, don't do this. You save your life savings and move on.
You absolutely should. And about half of the inventors did quit. They took the advice. But 47%, almost half, kept going after being told their project was hopeless.
Why? Why would you pay for advice and then completely ignore it?
Optimism, the inside view. They probably thought, these experts don't get it. They don't see the vision. They don't understand my passion. They doubled down.
And what happened to them? Did any of them prove the experts wrong?
The tragedy is, on average, these persistent individuals doubled their initial losses before finally giving up.
They doubled their losses.
Yes. They didn't just lose the money they had already spent. They spent more good money after bad, chasing a dream they had been explicitly told was a dud.
They paid a premium to lose more money.
Because they couldn't let go of the dream. Their optimism was too strong. And when you look at the financials broadly, self-employment is actually a terrible bet for most people.
Really?
Yeah, the source notes that for the same qualifications, selling your skills to an employer usually yields a higher financial return and much, much lower risk than striking out on your own.
That is a tough pill to swallow for the hustle culture. We are constantly told to be your own boss, quit your 9 to 5.
It is. But the data suggests that for most people, being your own boss is a great way to work harder for less money and take on terrifying amounts of risk.
So let's zoom out for a second. If individual entrepreneurs are this delusional, and most of them fail, why do we have an economy at all? Why aren't we all just working for the government or a few giant, safe companies?
Because of the engine. The economy needs these people to be delusional. We need them to take risks that a rational calculator would reject.
Huh.
If everyone looked at the 35% success rate and said, no thanks, I'll stick with my safe job, we wouldn't have new restaurants, we wouldn't have new software, we wouldn't have innovation.
So we are essentially free riding on their delusion. The system benefits from their individual failures.
In a way, yes. Society benefits from the dynamism, from the variety, from the competition. But the individual often pays a very steep price.
That is fascinating. It really reframes the whole idea of the heroic entrepreneur. They are heroic, but maybe not for the reasons they think. They're heroic because they're sacrificing their financial stability for our collective benefit.
They're martyrs.
Martyrs, wow.
The source actually uses that term later on. But before we get there, we have to talk about what happens when these optimists actually succeed. Suppose you beat the odds. You start the company, it grows, you go public. Now you are a CEO of a major corporation.
Right. Now you have a board of directors. You have shareholders. You have McKinsey consultants. Surely at that level, the delusion goes away. These are serious people in suits.
You would think so. You would think that once you get to the C-suite, things become hyper-rational, that these are cold, calculating machines. But the source material has a whole section on corporate hubris.
Hubris. That's a strong word. That's Greek tragedy stuff. That's Icarus flying too close to the sun.
It fits perfectly. Look at mergers and acquisitions, M&A. This is the Super Bowl of corporate activity. Big company A buys big company B for billions of dollars.
We see these headlines every week.
We do. But historically, the data shows that these deals very often destroy value. The acquiring firm's stock usually dips the moment the deal is announced.
Why? If the deal's supposed to be so great, why does the stock go down?
Because the market, the collective wisdom of all those investors, knows that integrating two giant companies is messy. It's incredibly hard. Cultures clash, systems don't talk to each other, the promised synergies almost never materialize. The market is skeptical.
So the collective wisdom, the outside view, says this is probably a bad idea.
Yes, but the CEOs keep doing it. Why? Because of the hubris hypothesis.
Yeah.
The CEO of the acquiring firm looks at the target company and thinks, the previous management was incompetent, but I am a genius. I can fix it. I can run that company better than they could.
It's the Italian restaurant owner again, just with billions of dollars instead of marinara sauce.
It is the exact same psychological mechanism. The statistics on failed mergers apply to other CEOs. Not me. I have the magic touch.
Is there concrete proof that this is about personality? Because maybe they just have bad data. Maybe they're being pushed by their bankers. How do we know it's optimism?
There is a brilliant study by Melmandier and Tate mentioned in the source. They found a clever way to identify optimistic CEOs, not by what they said in interviews, but by what they did with their own money.
Oh, follow the money. I like this.
They looked at CEOs who held onto their own company stock options long after they could have sold them to diversify. A rational financial advisor would scream at you, don't have your salary and your savings and your retirement all tied to one single company.
Right.
Sell some of those options, buy index funds, spread the risk.
Right. Basic risk management 101. If the company tanks, you lose your job and your entire net worth.
Exactly. But these optimistic CEOs kept the stock. They were effectively betting their own personal wealth on their own company's continued rise. They were doubling down on themselves.
So they genuinely believed the hype. They weren't just selling it to shareholders. They were buying it themselves. This wasn't about gambling with other people's money.
Exactly. They were risking their own stakes, which proved they genuinely believed their own hype. And the study found that these specific CEOs, the ones who held the stock, were the ones most likely to take excessive risks.
Like what?
They assumed more debt. They were far more likely to launch these big, risky acquisition deals, and crucially, they tended to overpay for the target companies they bought.
And did it work out for them? Did their optimism pay off?
Generally, no. Their companies underperformed after these deals. The market actually punishes the stock of companies run by these high optimism CEOs when they announce a merger. It's like the market has a built-in delusion detector.
That is wild. But here's the thing that frustrates me. If these guys are, on average, destroying value with these deals, why do we treat them like rock stars? Why are they on magazine covers?
Because we love the narrative. We love the story of the bold, visionary leader, and the press loves these people. The source points out something really ironic. Prestigious press awards actually cost stockholders money.
Wait, getting an award is bad for business. How?
It turns out, yes. The research shows that after a CEO wins a big award, CEO of the Year, Visionary of the Decade, their behavior changes.
The ego inflates.
Massive inflation. They start spending more time on things that burnish their reputation. They start writing books on leadership. They join the boards of other companies to spread their wisdom. They get distracted from their actual job.
And the performance of their company suffers.
It does. And crucially, they start engaging in more earnings management.
Which is a polite way of saying
Fudging the numbers. Not necessarily illegal fraud, but using all the accounting tricks in the book to hide bad news and keep the stock price up. They start believing their own legend and can't admit to any setbacks.
It connects back to that idea of the inside view. If everyone is telling you you're a genius, if you're on the cover of Forbes, why would you look at the base rates? Why would you look at the failure statistics for mergers? You're the golden child.
Precisely. You feel invincible. And this leads us to the next major psychological mechanism the source discusses. It's an acronym that helps explain why we get so locked into this inside view and ignore everything else.
Okay, hit me with it.
WYSIATI.
WYSIATI. What does that stand for?
What you see is all there is.
I love this concept. It sounds like a Zen poem, but it's actually a cognitive trap.
It's fundamental to how our brains work. Our brain is a machine for jumping to conclusions. But to jump to a conclusion, it needs a story. It needs a coherent narrative. And to build that story, it uses the information it has available right now.
And it ignores the information it doesn't have.
It doesn't just ignore it, it treats it as if it doesn't exist. Hence, what you see is all there is. Your brain constructs the most coherent story possible from the available evidence. And it doesn't pause to ask, is there important evidence I'm missing?
So in the context of business, give me an example.
In business, think about what you see when you're planning a new product launch. You see your goal. You see your beautifully written business plan. You see your smart, dedicated team. You see the product prototype on the table.
That is what I see. It's tangible.
But what do you not see? You don't see the competitor in a garage across town who's about to launch a similar, cheaper product. You don't see the pending legislation that might ban your product category. You don't see the possibility of a recession next year that will dry up all your funding.
Right. That stuff is invisible. It's abstract.
So your brain ignores it. And the most important thing it ignores is the competition. We call this competition neglect.
Competition neglect. We act like we are the only players on the field.
We do. And to explain how this works, the source goes back to a simpler, more universal example. Driving.
Ah, the classic above average effect.
It's classic for a reason. If you ask a room full of people, are you a good driver? Most will say yes. That's easy. But if you ask, are you better than average? 90% still say yes.
Which is mathematically impossible. Only 50% can be above the median.
It is. But the reason isn't just simple arrogance. It's a cognitive substitution. The question, am I better than average, is actually a really hard math problem.
How so?
Well, to answer it properly, it requires you to imagine the average driver on the road, calculate a mean skill level for that huge, diverse group, assess your own skill level with perfect objectivity, and then compare the two numbers.
That's too much work for the brain.
Way too much. So the brain, being efficient, swaps it for an easier question. It asks itself, am I a good driver? You think, well, I haven't crashed this week. I merged pretty well. I can parallel park. So the answer is yes. And your brain just maps that yes onto the harder question.
So I am good becomes I am better than average.
Exactly. But, and here is a really important nuance that the listener needs to grasp, this only happens on tasks that are moderately difficult.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if I asked you, are you better than average at starting a conversation with a stranger at a party? Most people who are even slightly extroverted will say yes. It feels intuitive, it feels manageable.
Sure.
But if I asked you, are you better than average at pole vaulting?
I would definitely say no. I'm terrible. I can't pole vault at all.
Exactly. When the task is obviously very hard or highly technical, the delusion vanishes. You know you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But business, investing, managing people, driving, those feel moderately difficult. They feel intuitive. And that is the danger zone. That is where we all think we are geniuses.
And we neglect the competition because we focus on our own feeling of competence. There was that quote from the Disney chairman in the source material. I thought that was so revealing.
Yes, Joe Roth. A journalist asked him a really simple question. Why do movie studios all release their huge, expensive blockbusters on the same weekends?
Yeah.
Memorial Day, the 4th of July, Christmas.
It seems suicidal. You have five $200 million movies fighting for the same audience. They cannibalize each other. One of them wins, four of them get crushed.
Exactly. From an outside view, it's bad business. And his answer was one word: hubris.
Hubris.
He said, and I'm paraphrasing here, if you only think about your own business, you think, I've got a good story department, I've got a great marketing department, we have a huge star, we're going to win. You don't stop to think that everybody else is thinking the exact same thing about their movie.
That is WYSIAD in action. I see my movie trailer. I think it looks great. I see my marketing plan. I don't see the other guy's trailer or their plan, so I assume I'll win.
It is the illusion of control. Research on startup founders shows they believe the outcome of their venture depends 80% or more on their actions alone. But in reality, the success of a startup depends hugely on what the market does, what competitors do, and frankly, on luck. But you can't see luck, so you don't factor it in.
And this creates what the source calls the optimistic martyr.
This is a term coined by the economists Dossi and Lavallo. An optimistic martyr is a firm that boldly enters a new market, fails because there's too much competition or the timing is wrong, but in doing so, they signal to everyone else that there is a market there.
So they are the canary in the coal mine. They prove there's an opportunity, but they die in the process.
Or they're like the first wave of soldiers over the trench. They get wiped out, but they pave the way for more qualified or better funded competitors to come in later and succeed.
Again, good for the economy. Terrible for the martyr.
Very, very bad for the martyr's investors.
We've talked about entrepreneurs and CEOs, but surely there are people whose entire job it is to be realistic, to look at the numbers, the experts, the CFOs, the people who are paid to be the adults in the room.
You would hope so. But Section 5 of our source material, The Trap of the Expert, is perhaps the most alarming part of this whole deep dive.
Oh, boy.
Because it turns out the experts are just as deluded as the rest of us, maybe even more so.
This is the Duke University study.
Yes, this is a massive longitudinal study. For years, researchers at Duke surveyed the chief financial officers, CFOs of large corporations. These are the people responsible for the money. These are the people who sign off on the budgets.
The people who are supposed to have the clearest, coldest view of where the economy is going.
Exactly. They ask them a simple question every year. Forecast the S&P 500 index returns for the next year.
So predict the stock market. A tough job, but one they're paid to have an opinion on.
A very tough job. They collected 11,600 forecasts over many years. There's a huge data set. And they compared those predictions to what actually happened. The correlation was...
I'm guessing it wasn't great.
It was slightly less than zero.
Less than zero, so they were worse than random guesses.
Essentially, yes. If you had bet against their consensus prediction each year, you would have made a small amount of money. When they said the market would go down, it was slightly more likely to go up and vice versa. They had absolutely no clue about the short-term future.
But these are the experts. They are paid millions to know this.
But the scary part isn't that they were wrong. Nobody can predict the market perfectly. We know that. The market is chaotic. The scary part is that they didn't know they were wrong. They were grossly overconfident.
This brings us to the confidence interval failure. I want to slow down here because this concept, confidence intervals, is really important, but it can sound like math jargon.
It does, but it's actually a beautiful measure of humility. So the researchers didn't just ask, what will the S&P be? That's an impossible question. Instead, they asked for a range. They said, give me a number that you are 90% sure is too high and a number you are 90% sure is too low.
So they are defining a safe zone, a target area.
Exactly. They are effectively saying, I am 80% confident that the final market return will land on this landing strip I've just defined.
Okay, now, if I am a humble forecaster and I know the market is crazy and unpredictable, What do I do with that landing strip?
You make it huge. You say, well, it could crash or it could boom. So I'm 80% sure it will be between -10% and +30%. You make the goalposts incredibly wide so you can't possibly miss.
Right. A wide interval means I'm not really sure. It's an honest admission of uncertainty.
Exactly. Now, if the CFOs were well calibrated, the real market value should only fall outside their 80% range. It should only surprise them 20% of the time.
Okay, that makes sense. So how often were they surprised?
67% of the time.
Wow. So 2/3 of the time, the reality was totally outside their sure thing range.
It means their confidence intervals were way, way too narrow. They were acting like they knew exactly what was going to happen. They built tiny little landing strips, and the plane missed the runway almost every single time.
Why? Why would they do that? Why not just give a wider, safer range?
Social pressure. Imagine you were a CFO in a board meeting. The CEO asks, what's the market going to do next year? If you say, well, sir, there is an 80% chance it will be between a catastrophic crash and a massive boom.
They'd be laughed out of the room. It sounds like they know nothing.
Exactly. You sound useless.
Yeah.
Leaders hate uncertainty. They view it as weakness. So experts are incentivized to be overconfident. They are incentivized to say the market will return 7%. It's almost certainly wrong, but it sounds confident. It sounds decisive.
The source quotes President Truman on this. He famously asked for a one-armed economist.
Because he was tired of them saying, on the one hand, this could happen, but on the other hand, that could happen. He wanted a clear answer, even if a clear, certain answer was impossible.
So socially, we reward fake certainty over honest ignorance.
We do. We punish people for admitting how much they don't know. And it's not just finance. The source mentions medicine, too.
Oh, this one is scary.
It is. A study looked at clinicians who were completely certain of a diagnosis while the patient was alive. They then compared those diagnoses to the results of the autopsy after the patient died.
The ultimate fact check.
The ultimate fact check.
Yeah.
And the doctors who had expressed complete certainty were wrong 40% of the time.
That is terrifying. A 40% error rate when they were completely certain.
Yes. But again, put yourself in the patient's shoes. Do you want a doctor who says, I honestly don't know, it could be 3 different things, let's run some more tests and wait and see? Or you want the doctor who walks in and says, I know exactly what this is, and here is the pill that will fix it?
We want the pill. We want the certainty.
We crave the illusion of control, and we pay a premium for experts who provide it, even if they're deluding themselves as much as they're deluding us. We reward dangerous optimism over rational uncertainty.
So let's just recap the situation here. We have a brain that is genetically wired for optimism. We have an entrepreneurial culture that requires delusion just to function. We have corporate leaders who suffer from hubris and systematically ignore the competition. And we have experts who are socially pressured to fake a certainty they don't possess.
It feels like we are careening down the highway at 100 miles an hour with our eyes closed, and everyone is telling the driver what a great job they're doing.
It does. And that begs the obvious question. Can we fix it? Can we train people to be less optimistic? Can you de-bias the human brain?
The source is pretty blunt about this. Generally, no.
No.
You cannot train this out of people completely. It is a system 1 response. It's instinctive. It happens before you even start to think consciously. Telling an optimist to be more realistic is like telling someone not to blink when something flies at their face.
So I can't just tell myself, consider the base rates and expect it to work.
You can try, but in the heat of the moment, when you have that great idea for a restaurant or you're about to buy a competitor, the enthusiasm takes over. The inside view is just too seductive. The story you tell yourself is too powerful.
So what do we do? Is there any solution? Or are we just doomed to crash the car over and over again?
There is a partial remedy. It's not a cure, but it's a very effective treatment. It's a tool developed by the psychologist Gary Klein. It's called the pre-mortem.
A pre-mortem, like a post-mortem, but before the patient dies.
Exactly. Usually, organizations do a post-mortem after a project fails to figure out what went wrong. A pre-mortem happens before you commit, before you sign the contract, before you launch the product.
Walk us through how it works. I want the listener to be able to use this at work tomorrow.
Okay. So imagine you are a leader in an organization. You and your team are gathered around the table. You are about to commit to a major decision, a merger, a new product, a big marketing campaign. Everyone is excited. The inside view is dominating the room.
Everyone is nodding. This is going to be huge. No one wants to be the one to raise a concern.
Right. There's a lot of groupthink. So you, as the leader, stop the meeting. You say, okay, everyone, I want you to imagine a scenario. Fast forward 1 year from today. We implemented the plan exactly as it is on the table. The outcome was a total, unmitigated disaster. It failed completely.
Okay, so you set the scene, you state that it failed as a fact.
Then you say, please take 5 to 10 minutes, silently, by yourself, to write a brief history of how and why it failed.
Oh, I like that distinction. It's not what could go wrong, it's it did go wrong. Tell me the story of how.
That subtle shift is crucial. It's the whole magic of the technique. If you ask what could go wrong, the optimist in your brain says, well, the market might shift, but we can handle it. Or a competitor might emerge, but we're better. It dismisses the risk. It treats the risk as hypothetical.
But if you say it failed, you force the brain to accept the failure as a past event. Now you have to explain it. You have to find the cause.
It unleashes the imagination in a different direction. It breaks WYSIOD because you have to invent the story of the failure. You have to look for things you weren't seeing.
Oh, maybe a key supplier went bankrupt. Maybe the new technology we were counting on didn't work. Maybe the CEO got distracted by writing a book and sitting on other boards.
Exactly. And it does something socially, too, which is just as vital. In a normal meeting, if you raise your hand and say, I think this will fail because of X, you look like a traitor. You look disloyal.
You're a buzzkill. You aren't a team player.
But in a premortem, the task is to come up with the reasons for failure. It legitimizes doubt. It makes it safe to be critical. The person who comes up with the most creative and plausible disaster scenario is the winner of the exercise.
It effectively weaponizes our natural storytelling ability against our own optimism.
It does. It won't stop every failure. The world is still uncertain. But the source suggests it goes a long, long way toward reducing the damage of uncritical, groupthink-driven optimism. It forces us to look at the outside view. It forces us to acknowledge the possibility of the D grade before we've invested our life savings.
It's such a simple tool, but I can see why it would be so powerful. It breaks the spell of the inside view.
Breaking the spell is the perfect way to put it, because optimism is a spell. It's a very potent, productive spell that builds cities and starts companies, but it's a spell that blinds us to cliffs.
So we've been on quite a journey here. From the genetic luck of being born an optimist, to the graveyard of Italian restaurants and failed inventions, to the boardrooms of arrogant CEOs, and finally to this room where we are writing the history of our own future failure.
It really highlights the fundamental tension at the heart of our economy, doesn't it?
What's the big takeaway for you? If the listener takes one thing from this deep dive, other than starting to do premortems, what should it be?
For me, it's the profound realization that optimism is a collective good, but an individual risk.
Say more about that.
Well, think about it.
Yeah.
As a society, we admire the risk taker. We hold up the Steve Jobs or the Elon Musk. But statistically, for every one of them, there are thousands of those optimistic martyrs who lost everything. The economy needs that churn. It needs people to try and fail so that the best ideas eventually surface. It needs the fuel.
But as an individual, you have to ask yourself, am I the engine or am I the fuel?
That is a haunting question, and it raises a final provocative thought to leave with you. If optimism is the engine of capitalism, but it leads to so much predictable individual failure, is our entire economic system essentially a machine that runs on the delusional self-sacrifice of optimistic people?
And if so?
If so, knowing what we know now, that these people are often biologically wired to underestimate risk, do we have an ethical obligation to protect them? Should the government step in and say, no, you can't open that restaurant, the odds are too bad for you? Or do we let them burn out? Because in the end, their failure is the price of our collective progress.
That is something I'm going to be thinking about for a long time. Are we exploiting the dreamers, or are the dreamers the only ones truly pushing us all forward, even if they crash?
Maybe a bit of both.
A huge thank you to everyone for listening. This has been a fascinating look into the optimistic bias. Try a premortem on your next big decision, whether it's a business deal or just a kitchen renovation. See what disasters you can uncover before they happen.
Stay safe and stay, well, a little bit realistic.
See you in the next deep dive.